So it's connecting. And hey,
Okay.
Vedansh.
Hi, Mayas. Hello, everyone. Um, Welcome to the live video. So I'm Vedansh Pandey. I'm a 16-year-old wildlife photographer and lover. Here's my friend Mayas. And today we'll be discussing and we'll be talking about, inculcating the love for wildlife and conservation among youth. So let's start off by introducing ourselves. Mayas, you can go ahead.
Sure. So my name is Mayas. I'm the same age as Vedansh. I'm 16 years old. Um, and I have been into wildlife for pretty much my entire life because my dad is a wildlife lover and he he's always had a particular affinity towards the wild. So he would take us on family trips to various national parks, various sanctuaries, and that got me into wildlife. And 3 years ago, we were on a trip to Ranthambore when he gave me a camera, and that enabled me to explore wildlife photography, which I really enjoyed. And I realized that it would be a great hobby to pursue and I'm here as a wildlife photographer 3 years later, and it's just it's been a good ride, and um, especially with Vedansh. I mean, I think Vedansh and I we've done a lot of trips together. He's also mentored me, and you know, he's helped me. Uh, he's taught me a lot of techniques. And yeah, I think even wildlife, it especially helped us bond together. It made us friends. And yeah, so that's pretty much my journey.
And yeah,
I
Mayas and I
think,
have been
yeah.
friends for a long time. So if any of you have missed a few minutes of the video, my name is Vedansh. I'm a 16-year-old wildlife photographer, and my journey has been quite long. My love for wildlife, started at a really young age when I was around 3 or 4 years old. My parents used to be posted in districts, so they used to take me to, sanctuaries and places quite often. Um, so the love for wildlife was always there. However, it soon, it developed, and I thought of, getting into photography when I was around 11 or 12. That was around 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. I made my, first wildlife photography trip in 2015. And then I got into, then I got to know about camps held by, if any of you are into wildlife, you may know Philip Ross. So he helped me, develop as a photographer and a conservationist and, and as a wildlife lover in general. And Miles and I have made a lot of trips together, and it's been quite a ride, to be honest. So why not, Miles? Why don't you show everyone the first picture we got together, first trip?
Sure, sure. So, well, this is, I think, T91 from Ranthambore. So it was one of my first ever tiger photographs from Ranthambore, and I think I mean you can clearly see it was shot by an amateur. There's nothing special about the photo, but it does hold great sentimental value because after all, it was one of my first shots. And he is a massive fellow. I mean, you can clearly see that he has size. And this was the first photo. This was the first trip Vedansh and I made together, and we really loved this sighting because clearly it's a dream perch, and the leopardess she was mystifying. So we just we enjoyed the sighting a lot, and this was the trip where Vedansh taught me. As I said earlier, he did mentor me a lot. He taught me about composition, and I couldn't find the photo, but there was a well composed photo. So yeah, this was our first ever sighting together.
So, Mayas and I have done a lot of trips together, and both of us keep teaching each other a lot of stuff. He's been a good friend of mine. He's been, mentoring me in some ways. We keep exchanging knowledge about wildlife, and photography. So now, why don't I show you a few pictures? Um, I have my laptop here. So first I'll show you a picture of one of my first favorite sightings. This is of a leopard which crossed our paths, known as the old temple male. So he was a really beautiful leopard. He's no more, sadly. However, one of my, favorite sightings, to be honest, and one of my first sightings of a leopard. And here is the other picture of the leopard Maya showed. Our first memorable trip together, our first memory together. So that was, something both of us really loved. So all the young photographers out there, so this live video is specially meant for you guys. It's about, you know, wildlife photography from a kid's point of view, as both of us are still 16. So I got into photography when I was around 12. And at that time, all it mattered for me was getting big cats, tigers, leopards. But as as I progressed, I realized that a forest, is a whole of itself. It's a whole ecosystem, and even the smallest of the species matter a lot. It's not just about photographing the larger species, the tigers, the leopards. For even the smallest, so that is when I had photographing the lesser known species. I could show you a few pictures here. Here is a lesser false vampire bat I got in a recent trip to BRT Tiger Reserve.
Vedansh,
And yeah,
your quality is going a little. I think is
let
your
me
just
let me
just
check my
check it
file.
once. Yeah.
Yeah, is it fine now?
No, it's still very pixelated. I think so. Vedansh is having some connection issues. I think the moment he reconnects to a stronger network, he'll join us again. But taking forward Vedansh's point, I think that was very true. Even when I started off, I was very, very focused on getting big cats, which is basically tigers and leopards, and the infamous Black Panther of Kabini. Uh, I was focused on getting dholes. I was focused on getting sloth bears. But only about, I think, a year and a half ago or so, did I realize that there's a lot more to wildlife than just big cats and national park animals. Because there are frogs, there are birds, there's insects, there's so much more, and you can really capture a lot of it if you are interested, of course. So let me just. Uh, I think Vedansh is requesting us again. Let us. Fingers crossed, Vedansh. Hope your network's good this time.
Okay, am
There
I
you
am I
go. There you go. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go on. Continue with your
sorry,
point.
network problem. So my main point was, it's not just about the larger species; it's also about the lesser known species. I had showed you a picture of a vampire bat, no, false vampire bat.
Can you please
Uh,
show it again, Vedansh? The quality was a
sure.
little
Yeah.
staggered. Yeah.
Here, guys, another one.
There you go. Wow.
So those are species called false vampire bat, and really lovely, uh, small bats which I got in a well in BRT Tiger Reserve. And let me show you a few more lesser known species that people often, neglect. And here is a Nilgiri langur, and a lot of you must have heard about it. So, so I got this on our way back from Ooty, and this was quite a special sighting. For it was the first time I sighted a Nilgiri langur, and yeah, it still holds really close to me. Yeah, and so that's the main point. My point was, it's not just about the larger mammals and the lesser known species. And Miles, you could go ahead. You were talking. Um,
No, no, I was just adding on to your point because your your connection went, so I needed to fill in the live video.
but
But
Miles has really good pictures of four-horned antelopes too. Maybe he can show you that.
oh, sure, let me just find it. It's lost in the. There you go. So here is a four-horned antelope, right? It's locally known as a chausingha, and this is a female. That's why there are no horns. Otherwise, you would have seen the four prominent horns right about there. And so it's found. It's one of the rarest herbivores you can find in Indian national parks. In fact, my family friend who was with me in the safari is a regular visitor to Tadoba, and he said he's he's visited the park over about 250 times, and this was the first time he saw it. And fortunately enough, my other good friend Venkat and I, we spotted this in Six Safari. So, it was really exhilarating to see something that rare within such a short span of time because, it it just shows you how you don't know about 90% of the wild. Because I mean, I've heard of Chausingas, but I didn't know it was that hard to find them until, I saw this particular individual and this information was given to me. So it was really fun to see that. So, yeah, Vedansh, you can take it forward from here.
Yeah, yeah. So we were talking about the four-horned antelope. So quite a rare animal. It's something that I have been trying to photograph for a long time, but sometimes the luck just doesn't go your way. I did sight one in BR Hills once, but they were quite shy animals, and they decided to, retreat. And that's how things go.
Yeah,
And so that was my main point. It's not just about the
big
larger
cats.
species, but it's also the smaller ones. And I think Arnav was asking for frog pictures. Yeah, that is coming up, Arnav. Don't worry, we'll get that covered too. So yeah, that was the point. Mas, would you like to add some?
Sure, but before I just proceed, can we make sure that if there are any questions, please don't put it in the comments. It'll get lost in the comments. There's a question and answer icon. So can you please press that and give us your questions? We will answer it. We have an entire question and answer session dedicated to that. So please do ensure you put all your questions there. Thank you. So,
Yeah,
like I said, like Vedansh was saying, there's too much focus on big cats when we visit national parks. We tend to forget about the little things that are rare and overlooked, but are in fact very, you know, hard to find. So I think the entire point of this session is to sort of spread awareness about those things and ensure that when when today's youth, looks at wildlife as a hobby or even a career, they shouldn't just focus on national parks and sanctuaries because there are so many beautiful hidden treasures because India is so vast. So they should focus on exploring those areas first because I mean there are what a million photos of tigers on the internet, but how many photos are there of say the world's rarest frog, right? I don't think it would even cross 1,000. So I think that's really important, to focus on the less less populous species, and also to conserve them, of course. Otherwise, they're not going to be around for long. They'll go extinct. So please go on, Vedansh.
Well said, Mayas. Yeah, that was a really good point. And a lot of people also just focus on, visiting national parks and tiger reserves and wildlife sanctuaries, which is, that is not a really important thing. It depends on your resources. Like a lot of people, they'll love to visit Kabini, but sometimes you have to explore around your area. Look for birds in your backyard. You may find a hidden treasure. Try looking around your lake. You may get a lot of birds. It's Photography doesn't start at the tiger reserve. It doesn't start at a national park. It starts
Exactly.
right at home. It starts right at your home, and
Exactly.
it would be great if you show them a few of the pictures from your backyard
Sure.
or something.
Sure. No issues. So before I do that, I think very, very valid point, Vedansh. And viewers, please don't mistake us. We're not anti-Kabini. We're not anti-national parks. We're just encouraging you to explore the unexplored or the less explored. Since I mean, as I said before, there are a million pictures of of tigers, but these rarities there might not be even 100,000. So, for instance, like Vedant said, if you want to start uh, wildlife photography or something like that, or even birding or big cat tracking. I mean, if you need big cat, I mean, if you want to start big cat tracking, you'll have to go to a national park, no doubt. But if you want to start birding or if you want to start wildlife photography, start at home. Start in your neighborhood, in your backyard. Then proceed to your city's outskirts, neighboring villages. Google what birds, what animals are found in your state. For example, if you live in Karnataka, there's a beautiful reserve about 2.5 hours away from us that has the very endangered black buck. So you can visit that. And the Jayamangali Black Buck Reserve, of course. And if you're into birds, you can go to Hampi, you can go to Kanakpura, you can go to so many places. And this is just Karnataka. There are 28 other states. So you can just imagine. So here's an Asian paradise flycatcher I got in my backyard, which is really hard to believe, I know, but it is what it is. I found it flying around with its beautiful tail in near my pond, and it ate a couple of the fish actually. So I mean, and all that took was about 3 hours of searching. So imagine what you could do if you woke up every morning at 5:30 or 6, or if you're not a morning person, then every evening and waited for a couple birds to come by. Imagine what you could accomplish, what you could sight. So, just start exploring. And backyard, it doesn't stop at the backyard. Like I said, I shot this beautiful woodpecker near the outskirts of Bangalore, and you know, you can cite those in cities as well. It's slightly tough though; they are very elusive. I also shot this Jordan's leaf bird in the outskirts as well. I shot this beautiful white-browed bulbul in uh, the outskirts of Bangalore. Again, uh, please do know I visit the outskirts a lot because that's my go-to for uh, wildlife. I shot this sunbird on, you know, again, Bangalore outskirts. I think, yeah, it's Bangalore outskirts. And I shot this beautiful pelican, again, Bangalore outskirts. It's a beautiful place called Rangantittu. You get pelicans, you get, if you're lucky, eagles, kingfishers. You get a lot of stuff. So just explore. And Vedansh will take my point forward now.
Yeah, so as Mayas was saying, you really do not have, if you do not have the resources maybe, or if you really not, you don't have time, if you do not have the time to visit a tiger reserve or stuff like that, you could have just, you could just explore your backyard, or there's so many good places near Bangalore. They're like near Kanakpura area. or maybe north of Bangalore, full of birds, full of wildlife you wouldn't have seen, different type of species. For example,
Correct.
if you drive down the Kanakpura area during the late evening, night time, you may get a good amount of wildlife. You have leopards roaming around our city,
Yeah.
quite a rare thing. You got elephants, for example. I'd visited this area near Ragi Haddi State Forest. You get elephants there, you get leopards there, so many birds, black eagles, and guess what? It's just around an hour half away from my house. It's quite shocking, but that's how it is,
Yeah.
we have encroached upon their land. That's a sad thing, but you know, you still get so many species of birds, so much of wildlife near your outskirts of city, near your backyard. It doesn't start from a wildlife sanctuary. It doesn't start from a national park. Of course, visiting a national park is a really good feeling in itself,
Yeah.
watching the animals in all their glory, watching the animals in their habitat, watching them, you know, in their natural behavior. But it doesn't always start from there. You can always visit the, areas close by. Maybe I could show you a few pictures. Um, so this is a sunbird.
Mm. Same one
Which
I showed before. Correct.
it's a shot in the outskirts of Bangalore. And this is a bulbul with, a berry in its mouth, and a coppersmith barbet, and a Tickle's blue flycatcher. So all of this was in Bangalore. Some of them were near Bangalore. So as you can see, you do not have to always visit, national parks for getting the best pictures. And you may never know what you do find here. There are a lot of wild, a lot of wild stuff and a lot of unexplored areas, which may end up giving you a lot of unexplored species. There's still a lot to discover, and everything is not, you know, human race hasn't seen everything yet. There's a lot of stuff
That's very
we
true.
still
Yeah.
haven't seen. For example, every week or every year we get new species of frogs from the Western Ghats, or sometimes we get new species of birds. So we haven't seen everything yet. So that was my point and my assist. So let's go next, and here I'll be talking about something else. So when a lot of people get into wildlife photography, this is something that comes really naturally. After a while, few people develop a special interest for a few species, or for, you know, they specialize into a few things. They choose their own niche. And that has been the case for me. For the first 2, 3 years, I was just interested in wildlife in general. I loved. But it came naturally to me in 2017. I had my first trip to Coorg, and that is when I fell in love with macro photography. And that was, photographing the lesser known frogs, the lesser known insects, snakes, a lot of stuff like that. And since then, I have done a lot of work towards, frog conservation. I've written research papers, and it has been something that really interests me, frogs. And, they're animals that have been really overlooked. And Arnav Pai is asking for a shout out. Arnav Pai has been on a few of my trips too. And so it has been something that really interests me, frogs. And I've made 2, 3 trips. I've made trips to Coorg, I made trips to Chikmagalur. Then there are a lot of places, frogs. Some people only expect to go to Western Ghats and get frogs. That's not the case. There are frogs that are endemic to Western Ghats. However, you get a few frogs. You get frogs in Bangalore. You get sometimes, frogs are some type of animals that have not been researched about a lot. Science, hasn't, there's still a lot to know about frogs, and there have been animals that really interest me, and I think I should show you a few pictures from my trips. Um, yeah. So here is a pic of a Malabar gliding
Gliding
frog.
frog.
Yeah, so notice the, webbed feet helps it glide, jump across. And these are tree frogs and quite rare, endemic to Western Ghats. And flagship species, really famous among macro photographers. And here is a frog called Rauchestis charius, a really rare frog, endemic to Coorg and Kudremukh area.
I
And
think, Vedansh, if you can, please share the common name as well, since,
okay. So it has a few common names. It's also called the bubble nest frog. However, I usually refer to it as charius for that's quite an easy name for me. So that too is a really rare species of frog. Um, and let me show you a few more. So as I said, frogs have been something that have interested me for a long time. And macro is not just about frogs. There are a few stuff too. There are insects. And here's a picture of a cicada
coming out of
molting,
its, yeah.
coming out of its exoskeleton, getting, stepping into a new stage of life, if said properly. And here is a picture of a frog called the Coorg night frog, quite a rare species. I think it was rediscovered recently, and it is endemic to Coorg. And let me show you a few more. Um, Here is a green vine snake. Um, lovely species of snakes, mildly venomous, and a lot of you may know them. They're found in areas with heavy rainfall. Some of them, you get uh, few vine snakes around Bangalore too. It's not that rare to get them here too. And this one is a really beautiful species of frog called
Hood
the
bush frog.
frog or the blue-eyed bush frog. Um, this is one of my favorite species. It is a flagship species from Coorg. It is endemic to Coorg, and if you do visit Coorg, you will hear them. You'll hear their calls all across the place. It's really wild there. So, so that was about choosing your own niche. Mias, you could go ahead.
Sure. So, as Vedansh's story clearly indicated, he fell in love with macro after a trip to Coorg with the Outback experience. But my niche, I think it's safe to say it's the exact opposite, since what I like feeds on what Vedansh likes. So, initially, I started off as someone who loved national parks, but then I slowly started getting into birding. But the thing was, birding initially was very annoying since, I mean, all the birds are really tiny. They keep making calls. They move around really fast. It's a headache to shoot them. And back then I was using, I think, a 4 FPS camera. So you can imagine how tough that might have been. But while birding on my terrace, I saw a couple of black kites and Brahmini kites, and I really fell in love with those, especially the Brahmini kites. And I couldn't stop thinking about raptors or birds of prey. And I started researching more on them. I started going through tons of field guides, learning about the raptors of South Africa, the raptors of America, and of course Indian raptors. And that led me to, developing a keen affection for them, because they just look so majestic, whether it's a photo or whether it's real life, especially if it's real life. So I couldn't not go after them. So here's let me just, yeah, that's an Egyptian vulture. It's classified as vulnerable, I think, Vedansh, vulnerable
Uh,
or endangered,
critically,
critically
I think it's
endangered, I think.
I think critically
I
endangered.
think, yeah, critically endangered by
Sorry.
IUCN. So again, this is outskirts of Bangalore. Once again, enforcing my point that you don't need to go to national parks to sight such beautiful animals. This is Ramnagara, in fact, where they have a sanctuary for these birds. You get another type of vulture called the long-billed vulture, and you get the very elusive yellow-throated bulbul as well. So this is another beautiful raptor. Then we have an oriental honey buzzard. So these raptors, they don't look the best. They have heads like pigeons, but I just love them because I hope that one day I'm gonna actually see them live up to their name, which is, you know, a honey buzzard. So I want to see them invade a hive, which would be really cool to see. Uh, then finally, I have this picture from Bandipur. It's a crested serpent eagle, and I shot this directly underneath. This was, I think, about 2 seconds before it took flight. And I don't think you've noticed, but there's a frog there. Uh, and this just again, this just proves my point that raptors are really majestic, and just explains why I fell in love with them in the first place. So what we're trying to say is, when you get involved in wildlife, try specializing because everyone has something that they like more than other things. So find out what that is for you. Some people like photographing insects more, some people like frogs more, like Vedant, some people like raptors more, like me. So just find your own niche. I think that's what we're trying to say.
Yeah, so it's about, building your own path, following your passion. It's something that you do not need to look for. It will just come naturally to you. And, you find your own niche, make an identity of your own, and it'll come naturally. Don't worry about that, guys. Don't, overthink about that. So that was our main point. And let's go next, Myas. Let's talk
Sure.
about.
So I think what we're going to talk about now is extremely important and something you should keep in mind, irrespective of whether you're a wildlife lover or just another tourist in a national park, which is respecting animals. So I think it's extremely important if you want to, you know, if you want to keep visiting national parks. I mean, you still can if you disrespect them, but you're just not a good person if you do. So just remember that you have to respect animals, give them privacy. Some people go, some photographers go all out to get the perfect shot, which might even involve harming or sometimes killing the subject, which is really unfortunate because most of the subjects are rare, they're endangered. So that's really sad, and that's something that's unethical, basically. It's something you should never involve in. Something you should never involve yourself in. Sorry. And so here's an instance. So I think in national parks, a very noticeable fact is that tigers have gotten used to us. They come out more than they used to 30 years ago when they were really elusive. And now, if you go to a national park, if you have a 5 safari trip, you can sight them. That's good. That's good that they're getting used to us. That's fine. But my issue is if you notice, look at the distance between the tigress and the jeep. Not the second one. There's a first one here. It's very less, and it's not dangerous. It's not dangerous yet, but it's unsafe, especially for the animal. And this is minor. I mean, there are even more major unsafe things done for photos. And though the person in that Jeep might have gotten a great photo, I think he got it at the cost of the animal's safety. So that's what I'm trying to say. Respect animals because their safety comes first. Your photo doesn't. And another thing is, don't just photograph wildlife for, the photos. Like, because there are a lot of brilliant moments in the wild. Uh, if it's It could be a tiger drinking water with its cubs. It could be a leopard mating. It could